listening to Crush Performance, your weekly source for sport performance and athletic development information. Get the Crush blogs, podcasts, and performance links at crushperformance.com. Now, here he is, the Crusher.
So we know it takes a village to raise a child. It also, you could say, takes a village to develop an athlete. There are so many people that influence and impact an athlete's life throughout their development. It's almost uncountable at times, but there are those special things that can happen in development that can send an athlete down a different road, a road to where they can actually reach their true potential. And that's what we're going to talk about on today's show. What exactly does it take to help an athlete perform at their very, very best? We look at the traditional sports like Major League Baseball or the NBA, the NFL, Major League Soccer, the NHL, the classic sports. And these are multi-competition sports. And then we have the event sports like tennis and golf, the Olympics every 4 years, and then the national championships that happen in between. In golf, the average player might attend, 20, maybe 30 tournaments a year. Very similar in tennis. So you can plan the ebb and flow to attack these certain events. But in the the multi-competition schedules of professional sports, you're at the mercy of the schedule. And then you have your beautiful off season. It takes time to develop an athlete. But what really goes into reaching top performance? Well, on today's show, we're going to talk about exactly that with my good friend, Andre Lachance, who is now the Senior Director of Casting and Artist Contracts for Cirque du Soleil, previously with Baseball Canada. If you listened to the show before, you've heard Andre on the show. We're going to get his perspective now that he's working with, the major leagues of artistry performance, Cirque du Soleil. Coming from the traditional background of developmental sport through Baseball Canada, Andre was a mastermind in spearheading some of the initiatives that would help young athletes and coaches not just enjoy the sport, but actually prosper in the sport and hence in life. And that's truly what it's all about. So today, get ready for a very, very special conversation with Andre Lachance as we talk about what it takes to be a top performance in Cirque du Soleil and what that could possibly mean for you as a parent, coach, or athlete in any other sport. Let's have a look. All right, well, hey, I'd like to welcome Andre Lachance, my good friend, who is right now the Senior Director of Casting and Artist Contract Management. Andre, hey, thanks so much for joining Crush Performance here. It's been a while, my friend.
It has been a while since I left baseball. It was like spring 2022. Lots of changes, many things, cool things has happened to me, so I can't complain.
Yeah, I love it. And when it comes to like the world of performance and where you're at now, coming from, sort of the classic sporting model of baseball and your role in the development side, which was critical, I think, in Baseball Canada's, evolution here, and the impacts are still growing there for sure. But now getting into more of the entertainment side, and of course, sport is entertainment for sure. So I want to talk to you about this transition from the sort of conventional sport model into this crazy world that is Cirque du Soleil. I've been to a couple shows and I am flabbergasted and amazed every single time. So I'm excited to talk to you about this today.
Well, it remains, like you said, it remains performance. The only difference is that in our case, like you cannot do any periodization type thing as we do in sports because we have to perform every single day. So some artists on resident show will perform as many as 450 times a year. That's a lot, right? So we think, I thought baseball, we played a lot, 162 games, but here I am with a company that performs in some cases like between 350 and 450 times a year.
That is incredible to me. We think about the major sports. Let's just talk about that for a second. I firmly believe that in, traditional, multi-competition sports, baseball is by far the toughest schedule, right? 162 games in what, 187 days now, I think, with the new
Mhm.
rest schedule, whatever it is. In the NBA, 82 games, NHL 82 games, in the NFL 18 or 17 games in 18 weeks, and then of course playoffs. But then if you look at like those event-driven sort of sports, like the PGA, there's a ton of tournaments, but the average player will kind of hit 20 to 30, I think, in their schedule. Tennis, very similar. But listen, everybody, 400 performances a year. This means, for multiple days of the year, Andre, they're performing more than once. This is
Exactly.
maybe one of the greatest exercises in athlete management I can ever imagine.
Yeah, and you're correct. So most of the time, like you'll see shows performing anything from 8 to 12 times a week. Like obviously, we're gonna have like in most cases, like Mondays and Tuesdays, artists are off. It's like their weekend, and at some point they will like the show will be dark for a period of time, so they can recover and do like travel and do like we do when we are on vacation. So that's the same thing. But you're right. And sometimes it's more than once a day. Sometimes it's 2 shows a day, and sometimes it's 3 shows a day. 3 shows a day. So when you look at like how you manage performance on a daily basis, the importance of connecting coaching, performance medicine together, mental prep, nutrition, and making sure that we take care of our people, making sure also that we know if someone needs an extra break at some point is super important for us if we want durability out of our artists that we contract every single year. So that's important for us.
Yeah, I can't even imagine it, Andre. You originally went in as director of human performance services, sort of building that collaboration and that multidisciplinary team to help the performers survive this crazy schedule. So I was actually very excited that you were going into that world to see what it was like. Because again, I've been to a few shows, and the utter athleticism of these performers is mind-boggling beyond belief. We work with our baseball players. I have a lot of pride in our what we do with our pitchers and our hitters to help them perform. Our offensive line, our quarterbacks, our defensive players in the NHL, our offensive players, the goalies, all have their unique little skills. But this is something else because, correct me if I'm wrong here, when I go to a Cirque du Soleil show, you have these unbelievable, athletically challenging, impossible performances. But then these performers are also playing to the crowd, making me feel like I'm special, and they do, and hats off. But
Yeah.
also, they play multiple roles in each show, so there's just such a multidisciplinary demand on these performers. I can't even imagine what goes on behind the scenes. So, Andre, where do they come from? How do these performers get into the Cirque du Soleil world? Because how do you
Right.
prepare for something like that?
And you mentioned versatility being important, where I see it is coming even more important in the sport world now. We see, for an example, like infielders in at the major league level being able to play all 4 positions on the field. Like you look at the DJ LeMahieu, for an example, you can play him almost everywhere, or maybe other than shortstop. You look at Gleyber Torres, you look at other guys like that can give the manager some flexibility during the course of the year and maybe give an extra day off as we go through the long season. So going back to your question, where they're coming from. So we have artists coming from, I guess, multiple profiles. Obviously, you got the circus people that grew up in circus families that went to a circus school where we have some great ones around the globe, and they just transition and come and work for us. You also have the athletes. They finished their Olympic careers as a gymnast, as a artistic swimmer, and then they're interested in continuing their athletic career by
Love
coming with
it.
us. But the big challenge for them is to learn how to be an artist and to learn how to be free from the judges. When they come here, for an example, they say, well, I'm not allowed to do this, but here with us, you can do whatever you want because there is no judges, so you can explore your creativity even more. So you can basically, if you look at how an athlete is built, so you got the technical, the tactical, the physical, and the mental aspect of it. I always like to see it as a table with four strong legs. In our world, you can replace the tactical piece by the artistic piece, the
Uh,
artistic leg that becomes super important. So we teach them how to have a present on stage, how to be better at interpretation, how to be better in the character that they play. So your experience as a fan, as a spectator, is unique every time you come and see one of our shows. So
yeah,
that's the major learning curve, for an athlete coming to work at Cirque, is how to become an artist, and that's not something that you learn like right away.
no, that's a learned skill, I would imagine, right? Because, I've had daughters, in drama, for example, and to see them, develop and get actually good at their craft. So I can appreciate it. And to go from traditional sport where, you're trying to tune out the crowd in the audience. That's one of the big challenges, right? Is get rid of those
Yeah.
distractions. Now you're stepping into a world where you have to build that relationship and actually interact. What a massive sort of contradiction there for some of these athletes, I'm sure.
Yeah, and from if you look at clowns also, like I've had great discussions with clowns, and they say, you never know, because clowns, they like to bring people on stage sometimes and have fun with them, but you never know how it's going to turn out. Like every single performance will be different, because I can have you, I'm the clown, you come on stage and you're reluctant a little bit, and I try to convince you, and you finally come and we have a good time and you leave and everything is fine. But you can have also someone that comes on stage and never wants to leave because they enjoy it so much, right? So how do you get rid of that person and return that person back to his or his seat? So it's never the same. So it's like 50% of improvisation and 50% of like scripted lines that they have, or scripted like script that they have with their
Yeah.
performance. So it's interesting how they perceive performance, which is totally different than what we see in sport.
Yeah, interesting. And again, for everybody who's tuning into the show here, we're going into our 18th season. So this is the second show of our 18th season here. And you've been on the show a couple of times. I was really excited about this one. And just in that last sort of dialogue there, I just went down to my notes and just wrote creativity. And then within 5 seconds, you say the word creativity. So I know our minds are kind of always have been too, sort of working on the same plane. And Andre, that is something that's pretty special. And I think that's something, you mentioned kind of um, the multi-position players in baseball now. We're seeing more and more of that. I think that's a strong message to any youth coach or youth parent out there. These kids should be playing and exposed to every position as long as possible, for sure. Um, but I think the way sport is going, and just some of the things I'm seeing around the world as I travel around, is we're really losing that individual creativity, man. And so when I go to things like Cirque du Soleil and I see these performers do these things and also react to, as you said, the environment when things kind of go crazy with interaction with the audience, that is a skill for sure. And I hope it's something that we can sort of maybe coach back into sport. Does that make sense from your perspective?
Totally, and it's how you manage your relationship with failure that makes a big difference. Like we were at some point in a phase of society where failure was not really acceptable. At school, you got red on your report cards and everything. Like it's all about performing all the time and not learning from mistakes. But like the environment that we're creating at Cirque is such that failure is part of learning, and being comfortable with failing, with making mistakes. I'm not saying that we throw a party every time there's a mistake. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that it's okay to make mistakes, educated mistakes, and learning from it, and elevating your ceiling as an artist. And that's it. I think that's something that is a bit lost in sport, and that's one of the difference that I'm seeing here, and how we perceive failure and how you celebrate it as a coach. Again, not saying that you're doing a party, but what do you learn through failure that other people around, other teammates will also learn, because you debrief it and you make it acceptable as a culture of your team.
Right. Well, my middle daughter took up freestyle skiing. And as a dad, I was incredibly nervous, to see these kids launch off these jumps in the middle of a mogul field, go inverted with a twist, and then land on their skis and come out of it. I was scared out of my mind when it started because I didn't know what the process was. But when I
Mm.
got into it, Andre, and I saw how the coaches and the process went for actually learning and giving permission to these athletes to do certain tricks inside of competition, kind of gave me some comfort. Listen, when I watch a Cirque du Soleil show, man, I get this sort of life and death moments during these shows.
Yeah.
There's some high risk things, and hey, I'm hoping she's okay. We saw just a little while back in at one of the shows, one of the performers fell from a trick, and I hope she was okay. But there's consequences here. So again, you mentioned right off the bat that there's really not time for that long-term development. This the exacting demands of some of these performances is just crazy. It's out of this world.
Yeah. And that's why we created the Next Gen program a couple of years ago, where we emphasize development, so talent development, because that's something
Love
that was
it.
probably behind a little bit. But now we bring artists that is obviously the next generation in disciplines where our pool of talent is becoming a little bit lower, and then we invest in them. We invest in their acrobatic training. We invest in their artistic training. We mention the importance of strength conditioning, because if you want to be a durable artist that will be employed for many years, the physical part needs to be part of everything that you do on a daily basis. So that program like generated like a new. It was a bit of a culture shift also at the same time. And then by partnering with some high level circus schools around the world, it allows us also to change the culture, so those elements of performance are a bit more, I would say, talked about, like in those schools. So when they come here, a little bit more prepared.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And I love this idea of these Cirque schools. Let's talk about that for a second, because you and I, for years, with Baseball Canada and other sports, have been talking about this process of long-term development and the periods of development. And again, learning the skills over time and perfecting skills to mastery at the end, which is what the Cirque performers are. The Cirque schools, man, I love this idea. What a great avenue for kids who are interested in this, but I think also to give, as you mentioned, some people who maybe don't have an outlet or a direction in life, to give them a goal and objective, or a high performance pathway, is I guess what I'm trying to say, to that world. What a fantastic thing.
Exactly. And we have partnership right now with, I believe, 5 or 6 schools around the world that are one of our next gen like training centers or partners. So we have one in the States, one in Brazil, France, Portugal, UK, and like recently we just started our partnership in Australia. So basically, it becomes a good sharing experience also, because we bring our coaches there to do a workshop. So there are some sharing of expertise between our coaches and their coaches also. So the knowledge is shared. And it elevates also the level of the artist, like indirectly. So when they come here for an intensive next gen performance program, then they're a little bit more advanced with their knowledge of what to expect when they arrive at the highest possible level of their career.
Yeah, and let's face it, if we were going to, we talked about the MLB and NFL, NBA, the NHL. Let's face
Mm.
it, man, Cirque should have one of those red, white, and blue logos, because you guys are basically the big leagues in that industry. I think that's what probably every performer is striving for, correct?
Yeah,
So,
totally. And
so,
and
so
that's why,
I can't.
I was going to say we become kind of the professional side of amateur sport, for an example, gymnastics, artistic swimming. So we play that role of what MLB plays for amateur baseball, but for gymnastics and other disciplines that we hire, from trampoline and diving, for example.
Yeah, I love the fact, Andre, that your coaches are going out around the world to these certain centers and just sharing information, man. You and I have been involved with Baseball Canada and with the long-term athlete development program, sharing all over the world. I travel around with Major League Baseball, trying to, share knowledge with people around the world, and it is so rewarding. But I have seen firsthand, Andre. I started working with Major League Baseball in their global development program 18 years ago, same year the radio show started. And to see what's happened now in baseball in Europe and Africa, Brazil, and all of these countries where baseball is still a fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh tier sport is incredible. I've seen the power of that sharing, man. Have you seen a trend since you've been with Cirque in terms of the overall development, maybe even globally, Andre?
Yeah, totally. And I think what you describe is important because sometimes we don't allow ourselves to be patient. We want to see result like right away. And you mentioned long-term athlete development. The word long is part of that title. It takes time, right? It takes
Amen.
time. And sometimes we want to see results like tomorrow. But when you take a step back and you say, okay, am I putting the right foundation for our athletes or artists to emerge and to flourish? And then I might see the results in 5, 6, 7 years from now. But you need to believe in your guiding principles. You need to believe in your foundation so you will arrive somewhere. But if you want to change it all the time, like and not be patient, like obviously you won't see those results as you described in your introduction.
Yeah, yeah, and also, when you first got the position, of course, I went on, and I've actually had friends that went from professional sport as athletic therapists or as strength and conditioning coaches, and they're now working with Cirque, and they're loving it, man. So I'm seeing all of these incredible professionals going into this world that is Cirque Soleil. Let's talk about that village of people that help these performers perform up to 400 times a year. It's
Yeah.
mind-boggling to me from a physiology performance standpoint, man. I'm still trying to register how this is possible, brother. Holy cow.
We have different shows for different lifestyles. So if you're in Las Vegas or if you're in Orlando at one of our resident shows, like you live there, you go to work, you come back after, you can have a family. It's easier, it's stable. If you like stability, this is probably the best environment for you. If you're maybe a more explorer, you want to explore the world, our touring shows is a good fit for you because you're going to be in a city for 2, 3 months under the big tent, the big top, and then you're going to stay in that city, explore the city, and then after 2 or 3 months, you're moving to a different place. So you can
Hmm.
still have a family. It's a little bit less stable, but it's still possible if you want to explore the world. We have the arena shows. The arena shows is like a week. You go to Oslo, Norway for a week, and then you move. A week after, you're in Copenhagen. So if you're really and to non-stable at all, but you want to explore the world, this is perfect. So we got lots of young ones, that are interested in that model because they can travel, they can perform, and they could see the world. So we have different, like I said, different context and environment for different places of your life that you're in. To accommodate you, and we also have events where you say, like, I want to give everything for a month, and I want to move from one gig to another. We have that as well. So you can be in Andorra for one of our shows, and you perform for a month or two, and then you move on to another contract with us or with another company.
Hey, Andre. So you bring up an interesting thought in my mind. I love that, by the way, because man, I'm telling you what. As I grew and matured, family life, my personal needs changed dramatically in sport, and so
Yes.
traveling with the team got to be pretty tough. So having something a little more stable, I love this. And with your role now as sort of managing the artist contracts and the ebb and flow, hey man, I kind of see athletes, working through the phases with the company. Sounds very family kind of. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and you can also transition after, let's say that you cannot perform anymore because, like, you want to do something else, or you're getting older. Like, it's same thing in sports. At some points you retire from performance, but you can still be around our company. Like you could come, like I'm looking at casting right now. I'm looking at coaching the teams that I've had or the team that I have right now. Many of them are former artists. So as a scout, like having been an artist before, you know what the company is all about, you know what's needed and everything. Same thing for coaches. So we do have a pathway also for after you perform on one of our stages. Some become technicians because they like the techniques, they like rigging, and they like all those type of things. So they're going to become a rigger. Some will transition career and do something else. Also, will go into production. Will go into working in admin and finance and or whatever it is. So there's also like always like a way to keep your employment with us after you're done on stage.
Oh, the post-career planning, which is a big, big issue in professional sports, because we know the average lifespan of a professional athlete is relatively short, unless you're one of those very few lucky people that they get to spend 10 years or more inside of a sport. So that brings up a couple questions, Andre. Like, what would be the average lifespan of a Cirque performer? And you know what? With 400 shows a year, we deal in professional sports with the stress of performing, the travel, the burnout, so to say. So I know you have a multidisciplinary team there with strength coaches, as you mentioned, athletic therapists, the doctors, the mental training coaches, the technical tactical coaches as well. With this team, what are some of the steps you take to guard the performers from just the reality of that kind of lifestyle?
That's a good question. So we do have like what we call a daily wellness questionnaire that we have every day. So when you check in at here in Montreal or one of our shows, we ask you a couple of questions. How was your sleep? How's your mood? Any soreness or whatsoever? And the system will with the algorithm will see if there's a change in pattern. If there's a major change in patterns, it's going to send alerts to the coaches, and the coaches can then change intensity, change the volume, or either training, or maybe give an extra day off, or whatever it is. So we do have that in place. Obviously, it becomes subjective because, like as you know, the artists can say whatever they want. But when you create a culture of confidence, which is something else I want to talk to you about. It brings that synergy of being honest and answering those questions properly because it's for your own good. And that synergy of working together as a group becomes also super important. Like the integrated support team that is around the artist needs to be synergy all the time because we're an artist-centered business. So if you're an artist-centered business, you have to do everything for the artist to be happy and performant on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, I like it. And let's get to it. The mental game is a huge part of it. One, these are exacting performances, and I know for me watching it, um, I'm sure these performers are so good. They have a breadth of an air, a margin of error that they can handle probably quite easily, even though I'm sitting there, my heart's pounding out of my chest, right? But the mental game, let's talk about that because, in sport today, it's something that is really taken hold. We hear about it on every day. It's becoming more and more part of the culture. And I know you're a big part of that. You mentioned something to me as we were sort of setting up this interview, confidence by design. One, I'm very curious. Second, all, without knowing much about what you're talking about there, I kind of have an idea. I love everything about it.
Yeah. So basically, three words that resonates for me and for the team on a daily basis: competence, confidence, motivation. So if you remember physical literacy, this is the foundation of physical literacy. So your skills,
Right.
your confidence. If you're more confidence, then you're going to be more motivated to continue. But we always talk about confidence. Like you hear results of sports on TV, and you hear the coaches saying, that team was that so and so is not too confident tonight or overconfident. So that word comes back all the time. So we did a bit of research, and the first thing we noticed through research is that a highly confident athletes or artists will come back quicker from an injury. So we said, okay, that's interesting. So how could we elevate the confidence with our injured artists or athletes so they can come back earlier, because we all want them to come back earlier. They want, we want, everyone wants. And we look at the words that we use with them when we meet with them. We look at behaviors that we have with them also on a daily basis that have an impact on their confidence. And then we dig a little bit more, and then we realize another thing is that we ask them through questionnaire, what drives your confidence? Like, where's that coming from? So what are the sources of confidence? And that 80% of the artists, and we found the same thing in sports also, 80% of them, highly driven by themselves and by others around them. Okay, cool. And then most of the time, those athletes, artists, we like them because we tell them something to do, they'll do it, basically. Okay, if you're strength conditioning, say, do this today, you're going to be fine. They say, okay, sure, I'll trust you, because they value other people around them and they value themselves also. But there's 20% of them that are highly driven, their confidence is highly driven by themselves, and other around them, they don't give a crap. Okay, so that's 20% of them. And as coaches, most of the time, we don't like them because they're resistant.
They come across maybe selfish, right? Or self-serving.
Exactly. Exactly. But what we realize, Jeff, is that the problem is not them. The problem is us, because we don't know how to deal with them. So we did some experimentation at Cirque, and even with strength and conditioning, and with those 20% that we identified pretty easy because you can recognize them, instead of telling them what to do, we changed our approach and we told them, okay, here's what I have in mind today. What do you think? And then suddenly everything changes. They buy in, they're part of the solution, you build a relationship, and you accomplish what you want to accomplish. So that's interesting, is that how do you position confidence and how they perceive it, and how you can change your leadership style in order to address the different styles of leadership that you have. So that was a big wow for us. And then we started to involve everyone, like casting interpreters, because we do have interpreters, because sometimes we got artists coming here not speaking English nor French. So you need someone that talks the language. And now can we empower interpreters also to be a booster of confidence with them versus being an agent of erosion of confidence? Because you can erode confidence like this.
Yeah, even just the way you say something, right? It could be,
Yeah.
hey, it could be like, all right, guys, hey, let's get to work, let's bust this out. Or, hey, come on, let's go, let's bust it out, guys, let's get this done, right? I mean, those little things, just the nuances of speech can be powerful. Hey, this is fascinating, Andre.
And I can tell you one example, like you're in a brainstorming meeting, and then someone has the courage to throw an idea on the table saying, I've got this good idea. And someone around the table answers by starting, yes, but. Confidence erosion.
Right.
So one of the things that I learned here is that you're not allowed to say yes, but you're allowed to say yes, and. Yes, and.
but no go.
No, but yes,
I
and
love it.
you could say yes, and we could do this, and that also in order to go. And then, so the person who had the courage to give that first idea will continue to contribute to the conversation.
That's performance culture right there, Andre.
Exactly. And that's not rocket science, it's how you behave, how you say things that makes a difference around the table and within a team environment also. And we're looking also, for an example, like, when an artist or an athlete gets injured, like his identity is changing, his or her identity is changing. Like, you're not with the team anymore. You're a little bit, you're there, but you go to the performance medicine, you go to see the therapist, and then you go back to the residence or you go back to your hotel, and then you miss that connection. And we even talked about, like your relationship with the show is impacted, your relationship with the environment is impacted. Instead of going on a stage in a theater, now you're going to a freaking physiotherapist place. You lose all your connection. So we were even thinking about, why are we not putting the therapist table in the training studio? So at least they have that connection. So those are the little things that we're looking at in order to reestablish that confidence, so they can come back more happy and more and it can perform even more.
I love that. And I think even in professional sport, when a guy gets down or gets injured or comes back from a surgery, we tried to keep them with the team as much as possible. Now, if they have families and they live in another part of the continent, yes, go home, work with a physiotherapist there. But we found that when they're with the team, seeing the guys every day, and the guys are coming in high fiving, hey, you'll be back soon, man. Um, you're right. Just the whole process seemed to work a little bit better than
Yeah,
being
and quicker.
sort of off on that island, right? I love that. It's going to be interesting to see what you guys see if that happens, Andre.
And I think we're just touching the surface of that project that we have in place that will continue to develop. And it's a matter of also of looking at competencies, confidence, good to go or not. So do you have the competencies? Do you have the confidence before you go to the next level? Like let's say in baseball, you're in AAA baseball, and say, are you competent in what you can do? Are you confident? Therefore, if you have a yes and a yes, then you can go. If you're not confident, then there's something else that we need to work on. And we
Right.
do
No,
have the same approach.
yeah, makes great sense. We're talking with Andre Lachance, the Senior Director of Casting and Artist Contract Management with Cirque du Soleil. Andre, you've gone through in your short time already, I think 3 years already. I mean, not a short time, it's gone by fast, but all in all, a short time. You've gone through a couple different positions there, so you've seen a lot with this incredible organization that is Cirque du Soleil. Is this confidence by design? Again, I the minute you sent me that note, I'm going, I love it, man. Is
Yeah.
this a program? Is this a process you guys are outlining? Is it part of that developmental plan now, or is it just part of the culture?
Yeah, it's more cultural shift
Yeah,
we had durability by design. That was kind of the umbrella type of concept that we had, and then we built confidence by design as a subset of it, because durability is important also, as we mentioned earlier. 400 shows a year. We want to stay with the company for as long as possible, so everything durability is important. So confidence is part of a cultural, uh, I would say, paradigm shift that we want to put in place, and not only for everything that is happening at the international headquarters in Montreal, but also on our various shows that we have, whether it's resident shows in Vegas, Orlando, or all the touring shows. So it demands lots of communication if you want to arrive there. Are we at a place where I'm pleased right now? The answer is no, because we still have to communicate, educate, and making sure that everyone understand and what's their role in it and how they can play a role. Because as you know, if you're a professional baseball player, you're at a practice in spring training, and then the GM comes and watch you play, your confidence is impacted like right away just by the presence of someone watching you. And that's the
just
same
by
thing
being
for us.
watched. Yeah,
Yes. And that's the same thing for us when senior artistic director comes and watch a performance. It impacts your confidence also. So understanding that you as a GM, and that's a conversation we had with the Pirates when I was at their event, their coach summit last year in January in Florida. Like your presence around the field has an impact on them, whether you like it or not, and whether you realize it or not. So understanding your body language, understanding your behaviors becomes so important in the athlete's confidence.
yeah, I love it. Hey, so first off, before we go any further, I want to make sure I'm on the list for the Confidence by Design T-shirt, the Cirque du Soleil Confidence by Design T-shirt. I just want to get on the list. I'll pay whatever it
Yeah.
takes, but I love it, man. I love that that's part of the culture here, and that culture goes well beyond the performance. We talked about the coaches, we talked about the training staff, the strength and conditioning coaches, the mental performance coaches, but these shows, Andre, they are Hollywood-esque um, um, productions. There is music, there is lighting, there's safety and
Costumes.
athlete safety. So behind the scenes, man, there's more than just the performers here. There's a lot of key people involved, and managing that team has to be something of an undertaking.
Well, you should, if you have the chance to come and visit at some point, just the costume section of the organization, like humongous, huge. It's the biggest department that we have at Cirque. But in talking with them, they have criteria for performance also, because you cannot put a contortionist in jeans. You have to put contortionist in a costume that will allow them to be flexible and perform everything that they can do. So for one discipline to another, the criteria are always the same. So it has to be technical, it has to be oriented toward performance. So they have those criteria that always measure before they let someone use a costume. So there is performance related to that as well,
Oh
involving
man,
costume.
the artistry and the creativity just in the costumes alone. I mean, I never thought of that until you said it, but hands applaud to those people because it's mind-boggling what you get to see when you go to one of the shows.
Exactly. You can add makeup to it. You can add all the different props that we use. Also, you got to be able to use something in a safely manner, because safety comes first for us, obviously, especially in high risk acrobatics that we do. So everything has to be considered.
Yeah. Hey, Andre, I'm going to tell you right now, if our listeners really do sit back and listen to what's being said here, um, this is a master class in athlete management and team performance. Like these are critical elements, and this could be applied to family life. This could be applied to a business. This could be applied to every individual as well. So man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate these conversations, man. I'm telling you, um, if when we look at your path and where you came from, and all the work you put into sort of that long-term athlete development program, looking at the stages of development, and now you're in this other unbelievable world of Cirque du Soleil. Going back to your sporting roots, um, would you would you have a different message for those coaches and families and those athletes? Because I'm going to tell you, it hasn't changed much over here, Andre. The injury rates were at all-time highs at every single level of sport, and some alarming trends in youth sport in terms of the seriousness of injuries. And in baseball, the arm injuries are epidemic. In terms of burnout and dropout rates, it hasn't changed much. And I know you're abreast of all of this stuff, but for our listeners, it hasn't changed. So now that you've stepped away from that world for a little bit and you're there, when you look back, is there anything else you would talk about now, or would you stay the course that we talked about for so many years?
I think the message that we voiced for years is still good, but I would probably put more emphasis into adapting the competition system, because at the end of the day, the competition system drives coach behavior, drives athlete development, drives parents' decision, drives everything. And the example I like to give is that if we decide tomorrow that baseball moving forward, every time you feel the ground ball and get the runner out at first base, it gives you 3 points. One for fielding the ball, one for throwing the ball accurately, and one for the first baseman to catch the ball. Like, what's going to happen at practice? Like, the coaches will probably focus more on defense and making sure that those plays are made, because there is a point value to this. So my point is, every time you make a change to the competition system, the coaches will have to adapt. The moment we implemented pitch count, coaches said, Andre, like, we won't have enough pitching. And we don't hear that today. Like, we don't hear that comment. Like, they figured it out, right? So the power of the competition system, I don't think we have used enough. And I've been fortunate to continue, like, less than before, but continue some consulting with the Norwegian Olympic Committee, and that's what we do. We attack the competition system, and
Love
what
it.
they find and what they do, and what I challenge them to think differently, and what they come up with. Here's a country of 5-6 million people, and they finish first at the Winter Olympics every single year, but they challenge themselves every single time that I go. And to see how creative they becomes with their competition system is mind blowing every time I go.
One of the most fascinating real life, real time sporting experiments in the history of mankind is Norway. how does a country with, less than around 5 million people crush these superpowers with hundreds of millions of people? It's fascinating. And you're right. It goes back to that competition. And just for our listeners to sort of fill them in what you meant by that point system. So Andre and I talked about this years ago, and I actually loved it. We talked about, trying to alter what the focus is in youth sport and developmental sport. Andre, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere here, but the focus right now is, hey, hitting a home run and winning games. It's the scoreboard. And what
Yep.
Andre's talking about with his point system, which is actually geniusly beautiful, is okay. Inside of that play of getting somebody out at first base, you get points for fielding the ground ball, you get points for throwing the ground ball on target, and then you get a point for that out. And now, so instead of just, scoring 3 runs, you've collected 4 points and 1 out. And that is ultimately going to change how the coaches coach the players, because the points are no longer about hitting home plate. Am I leaving anything out there, Andre?
You're right. So you're rewarding execution. That's basically what it is. And I'll give you a Norwegian example of swimming. They realized that they had a problem with tactics, how you manage your pace during the course of the of your race. And then we had discussion. I challenged. I said, you need to figure out something. So they came up with a competition that they do, not on a regular basis, but sometimes, where swimmers will align, and instead of rewarding the one who's going to do the quickest, you need to announce your time before you leave. So you say, I'm going to do the distance in 50 seconds. I'm say, okay, I'm less skilled. I'm going to do it in a minute 26. And the winner is the one that completes the race closest to the target time. So at the start of the race, you can have an
Ah,
Olympian, you can have a 9-year-old, you can have a 72-year-old, and they can all compete together, because it's about, and they cannot see the clock when they swim, so they need to pace themselves according to what they believe is the right pace. So it teaches them how to be tactically better when it's time to do a real race,
love it.
or somewhere else.
I love that. Everything
I know.
about that, man. That
Yeah.
is genius. And hey, that is something for any club out there, volleyball club, swimming club, baseball club, basketball club. The industrialization of youth sport, Andre, you and I have talked about this before, has changed the landscape forever. It doesn't mean it's over or destroyed. It just means it's different, and there are new opportunities out there. But these are the
Exactly.
opportunities, man, that we've really got to start harnessing, because those types of tactics, like you're talking about, can really have a positive impact, not just on the level of performance, but also in how long an athlete participates in sport, regardless of whether they
Yeah.
go to college or turn pro or perform at Cirque du Soleil.
And that's what makes the big difference, because people ask me, okay, what's the big difference? Everyone's talk about Scandinavia and Norway and Finland, and what's the big difference between them and us? Like, the big difference is that they're not afraid of, they have the courage to try new things. While in Canada, and I'm not like, I like to say it, we're world champions in meetings and glossy books. We like meetings, committees, and then
Yep.
we do glossy books, but then what? Nothing happens, right? But they have the courage. Like, I go sometimes and they have 2 or 3 months to do a pilot, like the swimming example. They had 3 months to do the pilot. You kids made a video and everything. Everyone loves it. Okay, that's it. It's done.
And
So
it
they
makes so
don't
much
wait,
sense.
and
Just
they don't wait
talking
for
about it makes
yeah.
so much sense. Another thing that makes so much sense would be maybe a longer preparation period for youth competitive seasons, right? I mean, we all of a sudden have a week of practices and then games start. There's
I
not a
know.
kid that's prepared physically, mentally, or technically, tactically to actually start games, and yet we start games like this. It's something that's
Unless
eaten me from the inside out for most of my life.
unless you change the value of those first games during the course of the year. If you
Yeah,
say that you play those games, they're part of the calendar, but they worth nothing for playoffs placement, it changes everything.
change. Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
agreed. Agreed. Andre, hey, look, I'm just conscious of the time here because I know you're busy, so I kind of want to steal you for hours. But this is a great start. I can't tell you. Man, again, this conversation, if we really break it down, which I'll sum it up here for everybody after we're done, it's a master class in human performance. This is the bones and the guts of human performance, man. I'm so excited for you and your role at Cirque, and again, I've been to a couple shows, and it never ceases to amaze me what human beings can actually do, from the creative side, but also from the physical demand side. It's incredible. And to hear that you guys are doing 400 shows or more a year with some of these performers is mind-boggling to me. So we know there's special things going on in Cirque, and there's a lot to learn. And that's one of the reasons that I love having you on, man.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully, you have a chance to see more of our shows because we always
Well,
have new ones happening.
yeah, no, I can't wait.
And hopefully, we can also welcome you to visit our Montreal too.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to, Andre. Hey, so on that note, you know my audience. We got parents, we got coaches, we got athletes at every level. We have GMs of teams that listen to the show regularly. Maybe just final messages from you. And again, maybe sort of revolving around your transition from, that the sport development world to the high performance, high demand world of Cirque du Soleil.
Like I would say for parents, I would probably say that don't hesitate to demand more quality, um, because there's no, especially now with the internet, with AI, like there's no recipe, there's no secret anymore. And if people don't know after all those years of preaching for long-term athlete development, for healthy organization, they'll never be better. So you can demand more because it's out there, and because we know now there's better. So for parents, is probably my message. For coaches, like be patient. Like it's a long process. Nobody's going to become a major league baseball players at 8, 9, 10 years old. It's a long process, especially and that's another thing also. Like I would also think that our, like right now in many countries, like the best coaches work with the best athletes, which I believe is totally wrong. It's the
Yeah.
And if you look at countries that have success, if you look at tennis in Canada, they made that switch. So the best coaches are now working with athletes in development, and they paying them to do that. It changes everything. So that's probably something in our system that we need to change also, is that hiring better coaches for when athletes are between 13 and 16, where life is changing, when they're teenagers, when their social life is changing, when their body is changing. We need better coaches at those age groups.
Yeah. Great stuff, Andre. Yeah, you are preaching to the choir here. You know that, my man. So
Yeah.
awesome. Excellent. Well, I cannot wait to get out there to see you. I know we've been trying to arrange a trip.
That'd be so much fun. I think you would appreciate like
Oh, Andre.
seeing
Yeah, you
seeing
there?
our equipment here, seeing how we do things. So looking forward to see you again.
Well, there you go. What a fantastic conversation. Honestly, a masterclass in performance culture and athlete development. If you go back and listen to that conversation, I will again. You will pick out things in there that are absolutely invaluable in terms of athlete development and organizational and team performance. Andre's been around the block a few times. He and I have been working on some of this for years and years. And to hear where he's at now, and again, without question, Cirque du Soleil is the big leagues of the performance world. If you look at what these athletes do, it is mind-boggling to me that these athletes will compete or perform, I should say, upwards of 400 times a year. In Major League Baseball, which we've argued for years might be the toughest schedule in all of sport, with 162 games and 187 days. Double check those numbers for me. It was 182. They added a couple rest days. I think it's either 180, 186 or 187 games now with extra rest days. And Major League Baseball also added a man on the roster. So it's no longer a 25-man roster, active roster. It's a 26-man roster. But regardless, probably the most demanding, difficult schedule in all of sport. And it was interesting. Back in the day, we had a great player, Mark Hendrickson, who actually came to us from the NBA. He was an NBA player, played in the NBA for a number of years, and had great success there. But he also wanted to try baseball. And I don't know if he hung out with Michael Jordan, because Jordan tried to do it as well, didn't make it to the big leagues. Mark Hendrickson did, as a pitcher, however. And, one day I was sitting with Mark, and we're just talking about, the schedule, this crazy baseball schedule. And he goes, I thought the NBA schedule was tough. He goes, but after a couple years here, and Mark started in the minor leagues. So he went from the big leagues of the NBA to the minor leagues in baseball. And he battled through the minor leagues to get to the big leagues, and he spent some good time there, and it was a pretty powerful pitcher. But he said there's nothing that he's ever experienced could compare to the schedule of professional baseball. And he was a starting pitcher as well. So he was only pitching every 5 days. But traveling with the team, seeing the team play every single day, well, that's a different thing. In the NHL and the NBA, about 82 games per year, preseason games, postseason games, if you get that far. And we talked about golf and tennis and the Olympics and all these sort of event-driven athletes as well. All takes serious athlete management, but I cannot imagine 400 performances a year. Absolutely incredible. Guys, listen, there's a lot of incredible stuff to take away here. One thing I just want to mention right off the bat is this talk about creativity. We were talking earlier in the conversation with Andre just about these athletes and where they come from and where the performers learn their craft before they actually make it to Cirque du Soleil. And I wrote down on my notes here, I'll show it to you actually. I wrote down creativity right there, if you see that, my chicken scratch when I was talking with Andre. And 4 seconds later, Andre says the word creativity. Because it's just so important. And I think we're losing that in sport. We're trying to train and develop our athletes in certain ways that we're losing that creativity. And I think that has a lot to do with that private time. And or later on, Andre mentioned, when they're doing their confidence or their competency and their competence sort of screening, they ask athletes how they're feeling. Are they ready? And he mentioned that 80% of their athletes or their performers feel motivated by the people around them. 20% don't. And, he mentioned also that those 80% of performers, athletes who are motivated by and for the people around them, we like those kinds of people. They're team players, man. They're in it for everybody. And we kind of dismiss or get away from those players that seem a little more selfish. And if you go back to a great conversation we have, I'll post this link in there. If you haven't heard our conversation about the book Intangibles with Joan, her book, she talks about some of those players in baseball, those guys who are sort of standoffish, really hard to deal with. Well, it wasn't necessarily their fault. You talk to the teammates, maybe they didn't like them that much because they were sort of standoffish, tough guys to deal with, but they wanted them on their team. And I like what Andre said there. It's not their fault. It's our fault for not understanding them and creating an environment where they could aspire as well. Because there's different types of people. That, for me, is a huge message, man. And we've talked kind of around the periphery about this before. What do you do with difficult athletes or athletes that think differently? No, they're not selfish. They just approach sport a different way. And as coaches, as GMs, as parents, we need to identify that stuff and build an environment where those athletes can truly prosper. And in the world of Cirque du Soleil, like many sports at the highest level, there's no escape. When it's time to perform, you have to perform. And in Cirque du Soleil, as Andre mentioned, those athletes that are making the transition from professional sports into the world of Cirque du Soleil, they're no longer playing to the judges. They're no longer playing for the scoreboard or the fans or for that W. They're playing for the crowd now. And it's the transition that some of these performers have to go through. I thought that was pretty interesting. But this confidence by design model is something that I feel we should all take home with us. And I've got my name on the list for the shirt there at the next Cirque du Soleil show I go to. I'm going to be looking for the Cirque logo and confidence by design on the back because Andre and the team there are making that part of the culture where failure is embraced like it should be. I mean, we're all just sort of a summary of our past experiences. And how we deal with or frame up and register those experiences is going to determine how we move forward, either with confidence, without confidence, with anxiety, with stress, or with this unbridled sort of approach to just attacking whatever is next, which is what we would wish for everybody, certainly all of our athletes. And so I love this idea, confidence by design, the confidence, competencies, and motivation, the three things they're really monitoring for all their athletes. And then also looking at how these athletes operate within themselves. So they can create an environment where they understand that, the coaches understand that, the people around them understand that, and then making them part of the process, which is something we've talked about on this show many, many times when we talk about motivating. And you can go way, way back. Man, this must be 2010, maybe even 2009, when we had Dan Pink on the show and we're talking about his book about motivation. And one of the things that he mentioned early on, and we knew this and just in performance psychology, by making your athletes and your players part of the process, you get a buy-in that you just can't get anywhere else. When they help decide what's going to happen, when they're part of the process of how they're going to go about, addressing whatever challenge or issue or hurdle you're trying to cross, there is a buy-in that you just cannot get any other way. So I love that at the highest level of sport, and let's face it, Cirque du Soleil is the big leagues in performance art. They're actually doing that kind of stuff. Man, so much to learn here. And I wish other sports and developmental sports would start implementing this. One last thing I've just got to talk about from that conversation with Andre is the Norway comments. We've talked about that every time the Winter Olympics come around. You guys all know how much I love the Winter Olympics, the Summer Olympics. I love these major events. But I am absolutely amazed at Norway. And, in baseball, if you guys hear my teams to watch, there's always these cool teams like, hey, the Kansas City Royals right now, as this show is recorded, the Kansas City Royals are in a division championship with one of the lowest payrolls in the league. That's why we're fascinated by teams like the Tampa Bay Rays, right? Or, the Oakland A's, who always sort of find a way to compete with one of the smallest payrolls without the resources of some of these other teams. So when we see, people persevere through adversity, that is something we need to pay attention to. And I think there's a lot to learn here. When we talk about Norway and just their approach to development with their youth, modifying the competitive environment where wins, that W is not the most important thing. It's not the only way you get recognized for your abilities. That is pure genius. In the swimming example that Andre gave, where, hey man, it doesn't matter. It's not about being fastest. It's about being who's most self-aware. Let's eliminate the clock. Okay. You guys need to swim a mile and this is the time we want. I don't know, how long does it take to swim a mile? Now, granted, I personally swim like a tugboat. So I could probably make a mile. I don't know if I would challenge for that time. But regardless, one of the things that Andre said there was interesting. Didn't matter if it was a 70-year-old swimmer or a 9-year-old swimmer, the fastest swimmer or the slowest swimmer. The goal and objective of that swim is not to be fastest, but it's to be aware and understand how to pace yourself so you're the closest to the designated time. That's a great example of changing the competitive environment. The other great example, and Andre and I have talked about this for years, was the baseball example, which I love. And regardless of what sport you're involved in, hey, write me, info@jeffcrochelle.com. Regardless of your sport, what could you do in your sport to modify the competitive environment to change the coaching habits, right? Right now, we coach for wins. In baseball, we coach to cross that home plate and hit the ball out of the park. In hockey, we coach goals, 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 goals. And at the developmental level, we just know the skill set, the technical, tactical knowledge isn't there to really be effective at that. So if we were to change the stress or the focus inside the competitive environment at certain stages of development, would we raise the level of performance overall? I've said it for years, and if you listen to the show, you've heard me say it. I don't believe we're seeing the best in sport right now. Even at the Olympics, I think we're always going to see things. We're getting better. And that's why I think world records continue to fall. We're seeing incredible things. You could look at Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge. You could look at Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews. You could look at LeBron James and all these incredible athletes in all these sports. And we're going to see special things. But overall, do you feel we're seeing the best that we could be? I don't even think we're close. I know we're not close because our developmental models are garbage, okay? Maybe a little harsh. Our developmental models need a lot of work to truly, truly help our athletes, the ones that love sports, catch fire, want to get into those high performance pathways, to help them really not just reach their potential, but raise their ceiling of potential. That happens way, way back here. And that's why, as Andre mentioned, the countries that are paying their coaches, their best coaches, to work with their youth are the countries that are having great success. It just makes sense, right? And so if we were to understand and maybe change that environment a little bit, would we see more people playing sport for life? Would we see more people getting, those scholarships? Would we see, there's only so many scholarships. There's only so many pro positions. So I'm not sure we would see more people doing that, maybe different people doing that or getting those opportunities. But I think overall we would see the level of performance go up. I almost guarantee it. I almost guarantee it. So anyway, so much to talk about. So anyway, I want to thank Andre for joining us today. What a fantastic conversation. And if you have never seen the Cirque du Soleil show, I think you can get them on some of the pay-per-view sites or even like Netflix. I think they actually show some of the performances on those platforms. If you get a chance to see one, oh man, just do it. I've been lucky enough to get to a couple shows and I'm never, ever disappointed. As a matter of fact, I'm incredibly amazed, motivated, and left in a state of wonder leaving those shows. And talking to Andre to hear what goes on behind the scenes makes it even more meaningful. So I want to thank Andre for that. And I want to thank you guys for listening in. Lots more coming up this fall on Crush Performance. So stay tuned and sign up for our newsletter at jeffcrochelle.com.